Everybody can hear me, I hope. I'll switch to the screen. Just give me a moment. Is that visible now?
I can see your desktop there, Derk-Jan. We just get the slides and...
Yeah, that's what I want to know. And then now we have a presentation going.
Perfect.
You can see it?
We can indeed.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody to my webinar about Agile test strategies for larger enterprises or for larger Agile projects, whatever you like. And I really liked it a lot because Lorraine was already tweeting last week and the week before. Like, if you have any questions, Derk-Jan is going to show you how you're going to make Agile test strategies, which is quite pushing the bar high, I think. So a little disclaimer, a webinar is a short presentation, and I might not give you all the answers that you want to have. But we'll see how far we go. And one thing that I want to say is that there are many different levels of test strategy. So you have high-level test strategy, what we were talking about the most in this presentation, and I'll zoom a little bit in on the lower level. But that's where, of course, we all have a lot of questions, because sometimes it's easy to say that you need to do something, but the how question, I'm afraid I'm not going to answer that in this webinar. So thanks, Lorraine, for pushing the bar high. But what we will do, some of the questions that I like to address in this webinar, is whether there's a need for an Agile test strategy, what it should address in order to add value, and a very trivial question for us as test community, of course, is who owning the test strategy, because that might be your job sustainability. So we're talking about Agile and talking about test strategies. There's some testing in decline, I think, over the last year, so starting somehow 2011, I think James Whittaker gave a keynote at the EuroSTAR conferences stating testing is dead, and there were a lot of discussions going on that, well, James was stating that all the new stuff came from developers, and testing, the test community and the testers were merely just lacking behind and trying to cope up with the change, but nothing new came from tests. A lot of people were saying that being there, having a test department made developers lazy, so we should get rid of them. And many organizations adopted Agile over the last years, and well, they embedded testing in the team. So why do you need testers? And that's still going on today. So in the last years, I think some major banks have dismantled the testing excellence centers, got rid of the test departments, etc. And last month, for a customer actually of mine, he went to the testers and said, like, the plan is that this year you choose to be a developer or a business analyst. So we're kind of quitting with the test thing. So that's a big help for us as testers, of course. And within the same mood, I think a lot of organizations got rid of test strategies, and test plans are boring, big documents that we don't need anymore. So we got kind of rid of the test management layer, because all the tests are done within sprints, of course, and within the team. But I think there's a small change going on nowadays, because a lot of organizations that adopted Agile understand that Agile is more than doing Scrum within the development team, and actually is all about business agility. And I did some research, and if you go to the share index, to the American shares, the Standard & Poor's index, they published that the actual lifespan of organizations have been divided by 3 over the last 50 years. So where they were like 45 years, the existence time, the lifespan of an organization, it's been reduced to 15 years. And we all have probably seen organizations that have started up very lean, cowboy-like, being real agile in agility ways. So not that they adopted Agile, but they were flexible, everything was possible because there was not much legacy. And once they grow and grow, the systems became bigger and more complex, more connections with the outside world, and both organizational legacy as technical legacy made it harder for those organizations to adapt. and to distinguish themselves from the competitors and come up with new businesses or services that they want to give to the changing demands in the market. So business agility is a big thing now, and business agility is a life-surviving strategy. So you need to adapt your organization to the needs of the organization. And with that, I think testing is somehow back on the rebound. And yes, testing looks different, it's embedded in development and quality is crucial, but not all the testing is in the team and not all the testing is trivial. And we need to have that testing in place. I read a little booklet by a Dutch bank, the ING, which had a very nice statement on testing and business agility. And they say we want to extend and change software for quite effective, but we need to have confidence at all time that it's still working and has correct operation and correct quality. And the only way to do that is to have effective testing. And with that, business agility being in fashion and in focus, testing is the reliable way of knowing that you have a good operating system that you can put in production. And this is easily said because a lot of organizations still struggling, of course, with their confidence with the way they test, whether they do the testing in a proper way, but it's back in the picture again. And I've done some projects over the last year where I thought test strategy were vital, and luckily enough, I don't seem to be the only one who's doing that. Because I was at the Agile testing days last December in Potsdam, and was really pleased that Janet Gregory gave a presentation about Agile testing in the enterprise. And she stated a lot of things that I encounter as well and I like to talk about, and that we need to have some testing organized, and it's not a trivial thing. So if you want to know what Janet said, please go to her slides. You can see the slide share URL below on the slide. But what I think she said, so that's my interpretation, she says if you are testing in larger organizations, you have a problem because Agile wants to have small co-located team, but very often in large organizations that's just not the case. You want to have innovative, open atmosphere, but very big organizations very often have a blame culture, and that kills the innovation, that kills the continuous improvement. Testing is idealistically part of the development team, and its quality is owned by the development team. But in large organizations, there are a lot of people outside the team. And at the Agile testing days, Deanne Larsen gave a keynote where she was talking about the boundary interaction map, some kind of graphical representation of all the people that you have to deal with, whether outside your team or outside your department. She didn't show it, and I couldn't find it on the internet, but I thought it was very interesting because in large organizations there are many people outside or influenced with. And very often what I noticed, and that Janet is also referring to, that in many projects are concurrently running in large organizations, and sometimes people are not part of one team but are split as resources over various projects. So that makes it difficult to do the real Agile stuff. And then she adds some other stuff that you probably recognize a lot, that in large organizations a lot of things are thrown over the wall. There's a lot of knowledge, a lot of people that are knowledgeable, but less people that have the overview. So very often knowledge is hard to find, and you really have to shop around because you don't know who you're going to ask. And since there are islands of responsibility and islands of knowledge, integration is an interesting thing, and testers are working in more than one team, or the organization has difficulties in looking at the total release rather than just having a component or doing your own share. So I like that a lot because it focuses that we need to organize these stuff when we have bigger organizations and we want to test larger projects or big releases. Michael Sowers is a blogger, and he recently in December also made a blog and said the test plan is back. And he said the test plan was old-fashioned, outdated, and the value might not be in the document, but in the process. I'm not completely agree with everything in this blog, but it was a highlight for me again that there is something happening and we're polishing up the test strategy again. Also on the Agile testing days, Gojko Adzic gave a very nice keynote where he said the way that we develop is changing. So we're changing our development more into services than making apps. We are hosting it as a service. So we're connecting services and ready-made components very quickly, and we can deploy it in multiple environments. So for instance, if you host on an Amazon environment, you don't have to build your user login systems because those services are already there and they're proven, so you don't have to build them. You can speed up, but you can click and combine a lot of stuff, and you can make multi-branches for different regions, or you can do the beta testing, etc. So you can use very much environments. But what he's saying is that from that, there's a focus from shift from development to testing. If the unit testing and the components are working and very easily connected and built, it's not really that high emphasis to do a lot of testing on whether the code is correct, but there's a lot of need in seeing whether the combination of the code and configuration of the code is actually working. So he says unit testing becomes less important. We want to do more testing after deployment. Think of the IoT situation where you have no control of your environment. And we want to know whether it's done. We need to have a focus on end-to-end testing and approval testing. So he's saying testing becomes more important in new development ways. So testing might be on the rebound, and testing is vital, as we all agree probably, but it will be different way how we organize it, and we need to organize it in a way that we add value. And that's a challenge, I think. So if we want to add value, we should find out where our stakeholders, where our organization has its needs. And I like to share some of the cases that I had in projects that I did over the last 2-3 years, where I was an overall end-to-end test manager or integration test manager. I very often, as a test manager, find my role rather fake in description, but it's very clearly what I need to do. I need to ensure that all the things are integrated. We say yeah at the moment that we want to release, whether that's a big bang release or quite a regular release. So I have 3 cases that I see around me and that determine the way I look at test strategies. And I will share them with you, and then maybe we can extract from that what should be in an overall test strategy. And the first case is to have a focus on acceptance. Note this is the same thing as Gojko is saying as well. And this was my case where we were working at a big organization with a lot of suppliers, and they were making parts of the system, and they were, well, depending on each other, but there were big contracts and they were kind of doing their own stuff in their own island. And I was asked to come up with an overall test strategy and guide the different parties that were quite stubborn because they had contracts and they knew what they needed to do. But it needed to tie up somewhere in the end into a working launch. And I was thinking, when I went about and got more into details, there's something missing. And what I was missing was not the focus on how should we do testing, but on how should we accept the total solution. What's the process? Who's going to accept? So I went about in my organization trying to find out how that was organized. And finally I met the program manager, and I had a cup of coffee with him and said, are you the one who's going to accept the solution? And he was trying to get out of it a little bit, was a little bit surprised by the question, looked around whether he could point to somebody else, and then he said, well, I guess I'm the one. Yes, I think so. I said, well, are you aware that since we're having a customer supplier organization, they're probably going to gift wrap the release once it's there. And they have all the interest because once you accept, they can do their invoicing, and it's big amounts. So they're going to make it shiny, they're going to make it look pretty, and they're going to try for you to accept it. And that might be a difficult thing. So when they offer you the present, what are you going to ask? And I helped him a little bit and said, they're probably going to ask, is this what I'm ordered? And they probably will say yes. Then you probably ask, is it complete? Is it all I ordered? And they probably say yes. And then you might ask, is it of sufficient quality? And then they say, well, you hired a professional party. That's why you selected us in the first place. So of course it's of quality. And you might ask even further and say, how do you know it's quality? Did you do proper testing? And they probably will say something like, we're a professional party, remember? We know how to do our testing. We've done this for years. It's our specialty. Of course we did good testing. Do you trust them? So we came up with some kind of witness process where we said, as an overall test manager, maybe I should encounter and talk with the people that are in the different parties and things and tell them what the process is and make some kind of witness report. So I will be standing next to you when they come with that gift-wrapped release, and I will say, I think it's wise to accept it because I've looked what they did and they did professional testing, they had good processes or good test results. Or I might say the advice is not to accept it. It's your call, but I didn't see professional testing, they didn't have good processes or they have lame test results. And with the empowerment of being in that function, I could go to the suppliers and say, this is what I'm going to do. So if you open up to me and realize that we have the same goal, advising the total solution, I will even put in my knowledge and help you out and use my people can help you. So we did that actually, and I did that several times, and it helps and people are opening up. And this time we had a witness process where we had some goals, like improving the quality of the solution, assessing the quality of the process, of course identifying mitigate risks in the early stage, looking at the coverage and quality of the test cases, and involving stakeholders. And we introduced some agile test techniques without even calling them agile. For instance, we had demos where the supplier who used to be in a silo was sitting with the stakeholders and they were discussing about what they wanted to see next. So that worked great. So one part is that in big organizations, very often it's very difficult and it's not clearly organized how people accept the solution once it's done. The second thing is once you're working towards acceptance, people want to know how far you are, and there's a need for status information. Well, I did some tutorials on subway mapping. This is a subway map that I used in an article made with Cecilia Ramos and Uncle Taiman. It's a release scheme for a simple web shop where we say we have release 1 and we want to have a product catalog in it and a product chart and payment by ideal. And then we have different parties that work on it, and we use this kind of thing in order to make a clear structure and to address people on their responsibility. So the product card is made by somebody or some party, and we just in the overall project management meeting say, we need to have that, are you in control, are you on planning? And this saves us from a lot of detailed plannings that are too big, that too are difficult to update and don't talk to anybody because they don't know what the actions are about. So I try to make minimal viable products in the stations, in the dots, so that's something that we all know what it means. They can be more detailed, but the best way is of course to have something that once we reach a station, a certain dot, everybody knows we're happy and we can run around in the office and say, yeah, we have the product catalog online, that kind of stuff, and everybody says, oh, that's awesome, that's a big step forwards. Since it's a clear picture which depicts the responsibilities and the dependencies, it triggers discussion, which I think fits agile projects. But it also puts testing on the management table, I noticed, because as an overall end-to-end test manager, I'm responsible for the definition of done in a certain way, and in the definition of done means that the product catalog is not ready yet if it's not tested. So testing is a central topic if we put testing in the definition of has the train arrived at the station. And I've been in situations where the supplier said, well, we're nearly done, and I could address them. So I'm overall end-to-end test responsible. I didn't see anything of your test results yet. I didn't read any test report or something. So I don't think we're done yet. And that's focused quite on quality and gave me an important saying in the organization and in the project. And people love that because that also means the other way around. You can say we have some quality and we have some delivery. So that gives trust in the progress of the project. A third case is all about integration, which is a project where there were a lot of teams. I believe there were 7 teams. Some were agile, some were not agile, and they were working in silos and very much not feature-based but system-based. But we needed to make a lot of adaptations in a lot of systems in order to make the customer journey in a different way. And remember the ING thing, like we want to know that the end result is working, so we need to have end-to-end processes working. And I was responsible for the end-to-end testing and the overall test strategy, and there were clearly a lot of things missing. So the business processes were not really defined, the interfaces were not clearly defined. I was not really sure about what minimal viable product, what the integrations that were needed, and the requirements traceability was lame. So I thought maybe I can make things a little bit simple. So I said, let's define 15 or 20 maybe end-to-end user scenarios, customer journeys if you like. And let's make them so simple and so basic that we all agree that if one of those end-to-end scenarios is not working, we're not done yet. And it's a little bit a question that's similar, like you can talk a lot about cars and what it should do and what makes a great car. But we all agree that if the engine doesn't ignite, then we cannot drive away. The car is not done yet. And so I made some end-to-end scenarios, and I spent a lot of time trying to find out what the interfaces were between the different teams and the different systems. And I came up with 40 different interfaces. So I could clearly state that if the interfaces were not working, thus if they were not tested, then the end-to-end scenarios were most likely not running end-to-end, and then we had a problem. So prior for running the end-to-end tests, I could say we need to plan some integration tests, and we can make a burn down chart where we say like, when is the integration tested? And we put responsibilities very low within the different parties and say like, if you change something on the interface, try seek the team on the other end of the interface and organize yourself with him how you're going to test the interface. And what you're going to test and how you're going to test is your thing because you're the specialist. But we want to know whether you think the interface has been tested. And that's very difficult for a lot of teams who are struggling with that. And integration is very difficult. I made this picture for a conference once where I say like if you have continuous integration on the right side, model-based testing, you're testing on a component level, integration can be done continuously in the sprint, but if the system size gets bigger, your system under testing, you're testing services or maybe embedding in the organization, you probably cannot fit that in the sprint anymore, and you have integration sprints or manual testing that takes a lot of effort, and you need to organize something because it does not fit in the sprint. So from the 3 cases, I think we can conclude that there's a need to think about acceptance, how we do that. There's a need for progress information, and we need to trust quality into the equation, and we need to integrate stuff, and we need to organize that. And well, that's what I think should be an overall test strategy. So from that we can derive, I think, 5 questions that I used in practice. And the first thing is what needs to be tested. But we don't want to, since we're doing agile organization, and we don't want to pre-describe all the tests, of course, but we want to define areas or attention things that we can give to the team as guidance, but they need to organize it themselves, and they need to make the technical translation and the real scripting themselves, because they're the experts of the system. Once we know that the right type of tests are being done by the right people at the right moment, there's a need for feedback and steering. So we can actually steer the project and change the path we're going, or depending on progress or problems. Then if we lay responsibilities very low, we might want to do the auditing of the test work. We want to ensure as overall test manager that the quality of the work done by the team or the supplier is of good order. And we're probably going to find out that some teams have problems with quality, have problems with testing. I've seen development teams that were lacking testers and were very eager on quality, but they were lacking the test knowledge that we as testers have. So we might want to help them out a bit. Pre-describe some stuff, sit with them, collaborate with them, etc. And then, as you could see from the last slide, once you're increasing your system size, there are tests that do not fit the sprint, so somebody needs to organize that. So if you're talking about what needs to be tested, I think I wrote a book in 2011 which is called The Hero That Guides My Nightly Rest, if you translate it, to get a grip on IT. I say there are stakeholders that have fears, have goals, have challenges, and we need to find out what they find important, what comforts them if we do them tests, because they need to accept, so they have questions, and if we can answer those questions, they can accept it with ease, with comfort. And the test strategy should define what we need to do at certain moments in the project to do so. If you define these, you get some kind of areas, some kind of lots, and you can, throughout the process, fill in the results and then make things. So an acceptance test driven report might be an overview of areas that you want to test with a color code or something. Just make it simple, where you say lot 3, all those tests are in order, but we need to have all 6 lots green before we can accept, and there's a problem with lot 5. So test reporting is telling a testing story, and as an overall quality manager or test manager, I think you should be able to tell this testing story to a certain extent at all time. So you need to know what's being tested by the various teams. You might not know all the details, not all the scripts, all the test cases, but you need to know and highlight what it is. You need to have some idea of how well they did the testing, and you might want to have proof, and depending on the organization, that's an essential thing for the governance as well. So you should address what should we write down or not. And then, of course, if you do testing, how do you rate the quality? And there might be some concerns that you want to put in the organization. So a combination of bugs into business impact. And very luckily, Janet's talk on the Agile testing days that I referred to, she showed some kind of test matrix as well. So I think we kind of agree. It looks different, but it serves the same purpose. And then you need to know, of course, how well the team did their work. So that's where the auditing comes from, the coaching is coming from, because otherwise it's a useless test story. I started in the beginning by saying that there are different levels of test strategy. So there's something like a policy. I think I've been talking about the mid layer, a lot of the strategic level, and you have operational test strategies, the strategy within the team, which is far more difficult, of course, because in an operational test strategy, you're probably going to talk about the environments tool, how you do your risk analysis, how your organization looks and who has which role, whether you do use CI or acceptance test driven development, which test you, I say threw away, but should be throw away, which tests you do within the sprint, but never repeat again once you've done them, and what tests you actually include in a regression test, whether you do the automated, etc., etc. And there's a lot of questions to be answered on how you can do that, of course. And unfortunately, I don't have all the answers, and especially not within the time frame of this webinar. But it's difficult also because if you say we're going to do test automation, or if we're going to do test-driven development, it bounces back into more higher level questions, I think, in strategies as well. So I once made a slide where I say these are the 8 things that you have to have in place in order to do test-driven development. Well, I'm not going into detail here. I made the same kind of thing for continuous integration and continuous development. And I say the third on the upper row that you need to have automated tests. But how you do the automated tests and how you implement that in an organization is not only an operational question, but very often bounces back to higher orders, because how do you implement test automation in a bigger organization? So they will interact, and new questions will be found and managed in a higher level, and some things you can do within the team. The last question that I want to address is who's owning the quality? Because if you make a strategy that addresses these things, who's going to take care of that? And I think nowadays there's only one answer, of course, and it's the organization, it's the teams. Because within Agile, quality is part of the teams, responsibility of the team, so the quality in overall should be a team responsibility as well. But there's, I think, a belief system, whether you believe that shared responsibilities work or whether you need some ambassador or somebody with a special focus to address things in order to collect the data and give that back to the teams or the team leaders and say like, whoa, let's not forget in all the hectic things that we're doing that we still have an eye for quality and we might be lacking some things. So I believe that is a use for some overall end-to-end test manager or what you call it. So that would be a job for the quality master. I sometimes use quality master because it's like a Scrum Master. He's not responsible for Scrum, but he's facilitating it, or a test manager. But that could be you, the ones that is helping the teams out that are drowning, or is guiding the teams towards the direction like let's focus on the quality and help them out. And I believe that there's still a big need for that in projects, and a lot of project managers or product owners or group of product owners or superior product owners, whatever you want to call them, that say like help me out with being my wing partner, getting the acceptance right, give me the data so I can steer and ensure quality. So as a wrap-up, because we're nearly there, I stated that there was a trend that testing was kind of seeing dead and test departments are being dismantled. I showed you that there's a need for business agility, and a lot of organizations are understanding that testing is vital in order to trust that what they put live is okay, and that's regarded as a necessity for business agility. And I showed you some of the experience that I had in order to derive 5 questions that should be in a high-level test strategy. And I hope that's helpful for you, and I wish you very luck with your strategy. So that was it for me, and I think we should go over to Derek again.
Thank you very much, Derk-Jan, for that presentation. I'm just going to open up my screen here again. I'm going to go through 1 or 2 more slides before we look at your questions. So if you have any questions for Derk-Jan and you haven't already typed them, please do so now, and we'll get to them very shortly. So on the 27th of this month, the 27th and the 28th, we have a conference in London called EuroSTAR. And there's going to be a number of keynotes, tutorials, conversation tracks, workshops, and just a whole lot going on. So if you want to find out more about this upcoming conference, just head over to ukstar.eurostarssoftwaretesting.com. And if you're thinking of going to this conference and you're going as a group, then you can avail of our group discount where you can get 3 tickets for the price of 4. And there's the link below at ukstar.eurostarssoftwaretesting.com/group booking. Now we have more webinars coming up, and the next webinar in the pipeline is on performance in a DevOps world, and that's with Mark Tomlinson, and that will take place next month on March 21st. So to register for that, just head over to the Test Huddle website and you'll see the webinars that are coming up in the coming months in our upcoming webinars tab. So now let's have a look at some of your questions. And I'll just open the questions field here in front of me. I have one person here, Derk-Jan, that's asking, which tool are you using to generate the chart that you had there on the page 19 of your slides?
I think you're referring, I'm not sure what page 19 is, but that's the subway map probably with the releases. I have good news for you. I do it in PowerPoint, so it's easy, low threshold. And if you go to my blog there is, and you type in subway mapping, there's probably some template PowerPoint that you can open and just demolish and adapt to your own needs. And if that doesn't work, send me an email.
And another question here, Derk-Jan, it says, can you please repeat what was said in the beginning? Do you see companies establishing centers of excellence, testing factories, etc.?
I don't see them installing them. So I said that some organizations got rid of them. So I don't have any practical experience with people establishing it again. You got something like squads and guilds, of course. So in organizations that use the Spotify model, you got testing guilds, which might grow out into some formal excellence center again in time. But I see that there's a need, and people within the projects adapt things or embrace you when you do this kind of stuff. But I don't know whether organizations make it formal again and create departments for it. So I said it was on the rebound, but it's not that on the rebound. I'm not sure if you want that either.
And before I go on to the next slide as well, I just want to mention as well, a few people have pointed out my lip slip there. I made a mistake. I said that there was 3 tickets for the price of 4. It's the other way around, of course. It's 4 tickets for the price of 3 to the UK STAR conference. So
you were wondering why nobody was replying.
Yeah. Apologies everyone for the confusion there. So anyways, back to the questions here. And another person here is asking or mentions said you mentioned 3 different levels of strategy required: policy, strategic, and organizational. Are you able to expand a little bit on the first 2, those being the policy and strategic?
Well, it's a difficult thing. I'm kind of trying to sort that one out, because I noticed that when I'm talking about test strategies, a lot of people have different different interests or different ideas about what a test strategy is. So very often I talk with Jan-Jaap Kannegieter, we're doing some tutorial together on it, and I was talking about test strategies, and he said, that might be a boring topic. And then we start discussing what should be in a test strategy, and he said, oh, I think about a more operational layer. So I think what I showed you today is very much on a high level. For some people that might be too much on a high level and a little bit vague. So there might be more higher level. There should be something like a general policy which comes from the organization. But I think the lower 2 levels are the most interesting ones, because with the strategic level that we talked about today, you're really helping out projects or departments with gaining trust and control. And with the operational layer, you get into the real details and you help out the individual teams how you can do that. So I hope that's an answer. So I'm not really sure on the policy level.
Another person here asks, how would you go about putting this strategy in place if there isn't a single product owner in the organization? The organization structure is more like business SMEs per department.
Yeah, I think the answer would be go to the products definition that you have. So the organization is having products, if it's probably, and products are owned by product owners. And if that's not the case, then the definition of products in the organization is not well organized. And I'm talking about feature flips and that kind of things. So you might have a problem if that's not in place. But there should be some people that are responsible for the customer journey of one area, of one product, of one service. And if you get those people together, you can say to them, like, I'm as overall test manager, want to ensure business agility. We want to be better and we want to be faster. The Agile values. Do you agree? Most likely they will agree on that level. And then you can say, like, what do we need to do in order to trust the release that we're having? And then I think you come up with some kind of the lot picture that I showed you, where you say, these are the things that we need to test in general, or maybe the customer journeys like the picture in the car. So are these not the things that we should have in place before we know we have a good service again? And if you can get them together and have a discussion on that, I think it's a very mature discussion. It's your challenge as a test manager, if you take that, to translate that to the teams and to the product owners and say, like, this is coming from the organization. I think we need to put these activities somewhere on the backlog. So that's how I should do it. And the good thing is that you put testing. I should start with the bad thing. The bad thing is this is difficult. And you might need to get out of your comfort zone. And I've seen test coordinators that are really much a coordinator and just getting the resources and the environments done and making the planning. So you need to work on a higher level So that might be difficult for some people that are listening now. But the good thing is you have a mature discussion about what it's really is about. And you put your role, I think, in a central position. Because everybody is going to like you if you give the overview and say, like, these are the things that we want to have in place if we trust. And I have an overview, I give transparency, and I show you where we actually have tests done and have good results and where we're lacking information. What should we do with that? Is that an answer? I hope so.
What is approval testing? Is it different from acceptance testing?
I think it's the same, but acceptance, there's some discussions going on about terminology. For me, accepting is very often a formal acceptance, so it has to do with a signature and invoicing, like I said it. Approval testing might be more within the organization where stakeholders approve the solution that's been provided to them, and it's less formal by contract. But I think you can combine them, or it doesn't really matter. It's not going to terms, so do whatever feels best.
Is there a way I can document a process for including business agility in test strategy?
Can you repeat that question again?
No problem. The question is there a way I can document a process for including business agility in test strategy?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure what the question is actually, because it's about business agility embedding in testing. I think if you want to have business agility, you want to have trust that the adaptations that you make or the extensions that you make don't result in failing end-to-end scenarios. So there's a combination or a relation between that, and I'm not really sure how you could document the process. It's on one hand to do with trust, I think. So I've been in organizations that were holding their hearts in fear with every release, because that would probably mean that there was something falling over and they need to do a lot of bug fixing. So that's not helping business agility. So about getting to business agility and improve it would be something like show that your releases get better and you have less ad hoc bug fix needed. And from that you can make a translation, what kind of tests do we need to install and have in place in order to prevent that from happening. So that's, I think, really a trial and error thing based on the experience that you have. But how you document that process, or how you document how you can do that. What I did, I'm not really sure if that's the answer to the question. For one of the projects, the third case, I was asked to write a test strategy very upfront in the project, where I included those 5 questions, like how am I going to determine what tests I'm going to do, how am I going to provide a dashboard, and based on what, and who's going to see the dashboard, how am I going to do the audit. And I showed you the little table with the goals of the audit, and we had a demo and a review, etc. And I said, how am I going to support teams? And so you can make some processes around those things. So you can write a document about that if you want, and it doesn't have to be that big. But I'm not really sure whether I answered the question. I think I talked a lot without giving the actual answer, but I hope it was sufficient.
Another person here, Derk-Jan, is asking, could you elaborate a bit on what sort of areas you are monitoring to gauge the quality of the testing taking place?
Well, that will be a topic for a kind of TPI assessment, I guess. So you can freak on this part. If you have a formal organization and it doesn't put you on the brake, you can lose yourself completely in complete TPI assessments that you run throughout on a regular basis and make dashboards on the maturity, etc. But on a low-level thing, I think you can see. Sorry, my daughter is coming in, so I'm a little bit distracted now. You can think what's the essence of the testing that you do. And I like test managers or teams to think up front what they want to test. So they should be able to tell and think about it and tell why they want to test certain things. They should be able to tell them what tests they did and explain the results of them, and maybe explain why they deviated from the plan. And you can do that in half an hour. And I very often play the game is game over kind of thing. I notice that I say a lot of in this webinar. But if I ask that question and the test manager of the team says, oh, I don't know actually why we did the things that we did, or I cannot really tell what we did, then they game over, then you're not there yet. But if they have a proper story, very often I think that's level 1. So I cannot always judge technically whether the story is correct and complete and true, but they gave it some thoughts, and since they're professionals, they're at a certain level at least. So that's the lightweight thing. I think the first thing is assess whether you think you're talking with a team that knows what it's doing and can explain why it's doing. Telling the testing story is a good thing for that. If they can tell the test story, then they probably know what they're doing. And then from that you can, without having formal metrics, you can also distinguish that some teams do not know what they're doing or are struggling with something. That's, I think, my answer.
And another person is asking, could you explain a bit more about the test-driven development approach?
No, I'm not going to do that. That will be a new webinar on test-driven development. It's too much off topic now, I think.
And the next person here.
Sorry.
And
sorry for that. Yeah.
No problem, Derk-Jan. I understand that you have a lot of stuff going on there as well. So maybe we might take one other question and we can wrap it up then.
Yeah, I think that's a good solution. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. This person here mentions that they said, I see in many Agile teams, the developers get reluctant to do the functional testing and leave the work to dedicated testers. I'm just wondering if you had any insights on this.
Yeah, it depends on the maturity of the team, I guess. So there are teams that do a lot of development and then they have one tester in the team and that's doing all the tests. And he's completely sweating and frustrated and stressed by the end of each sprint. But that's not proper Agile, of course. And I've seen teams that turned that a little bit around and made it a collective responsibility. And you see it happening at the board. Very often my Scrum boards of my teams have to do in progress and then a test column and then done. And if I'm coaching Agile teams, then I'm very often, say, at 2/3 of the sprint, address them. There are items in the to-test column, and let's focus on finishing those things rather than building new stuff. And then from that, very often it triggers the discussion that people say, who's going to help out with that? Can we do it together? And I encourage that greatly. But yeah, there are teams that don't work that way, but I think it's an Agile maturity thing.
Okay, great, Derk-Jan. I think we'll wrap it up at that, and just want to thank you very much for taking time out today to present this webinar. It was really great. There's lots of great feedback here, and a lot of people are asking as well about is it being recorded? And the answer is yes. We record all of our webinars,
yeah.
So you'll be able to check that out shortly after this webinar finishes. I'll send you all on a link that'll bring you through to the resource page. So thank you guys for coming along today. All your questions, apologies if we can't get through them all. There's so many of them and we're a little stuck for time. So we hope you can come along as well to future webinars, and thanks to our presenter again today, Derk-Jan. We'll see you all again soon.
Thank you all for listening.
Take care,
Yeah.
everybody.
See you around.